3. Aside from being the number of future Sean Daniel presidential terms, it is also the number of the pentatonic position, which I think is the best educational tool as far as seeing the fretboard. So today we're going to talk about, we're going to continue this kind of series in E minor or G major pentatonic by going into the 3rd position. So the position looks like this. We're going to start on the 5th fret of the low E string. You can use your middle finger, pointer finger, whatever your pleasure is. I'm going to do it with my middle finger starting off. It's going to go 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 7. 4, 7, 5, 8, 5, 7. So you notice I actually started with my middle finger, my pinky, and I ended up with my pointer finger and my ring finger. So the fingering that you actually use is kind of contextual into how you kind of play, which is, I think, an important thing to think about when you're talking about just drilling these shapes and seeing them more as connected pieces of the fretboard instead of individual shapes, all right? So one thing, again, talking about shapes, I think this is the best position to really talk about different shapes, okay? So let's just focus in on the lowest 3 strings. We've got 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 7. It doesn't get any easier to remember than that. It's really the same thing, and you can just riff right through it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take those lowest 3 strings, and we're going to use this as an extension of the first 2 shapes that we already used. So again, the first shape was E minor pentatonic position 1. Then we did the one that's rooted on the G. So it's more like a major shape, right? It starts on the G. And now we're going to continue on to the A, all right? So what we can do is we can start on just one string. Open the G, which is the third fret, 5th fret on the A, which you can think of the 2nd note in G's shape or the 1st note in A's shape, right? So we can go through on one string into where we just ended, okay? So open, 3, 5, 7. That takes us through really 3 different shapes that we've been working with. And I think the cool thing about that is you can start kind of gliding in between them like, all right? So remember, we have these first, really easy 5, 7, this little 5, 7 run fretwise between the E, A, and D strings. And we can start with the E, which is our root note in E minor, E, G, A, B into that. All that is just running through a couple different shapes to kind of create something cool. Doesn't have to start on the E string. You can start on absolutely any string. That's why it's good to start seeing them as pieces that you can fit together, okay? Now, the next thing that we're going to talk about is the bottom 3 strings of this shape, okay? Because we have this real nice symmetry going on with the lowest 3 strings, but then we kind of get into a position where we have to maybe start using different fingers, okay? Or different fingers for frets. Now, the way I like to see this is to find a shape that you're already familiar with hidden inside of this shape. So in the previous video, we talked about how the top of one shape is the bottom of another, okay? So what I mean by that, if we take the bottom of the 2nd shape we learned, position 2 that we learned on this G, the bottom of it is going to be the 2nd note on each string. So this is the top, this is the bottom, again, if I'm making a shape out of the fretboard, okay? So 3rd fret, 5th fret. If I know this shape, I know that the bottom is going to be 5, 5, 5, 4, 5, 5, okay? So by knowing this 2nd position, I already know half of the 3rd position because I can just go through the bottom of the previous position and think of it as the top of my other one. So here's whatever you want to see this as. The top of position 3 or the bottom of position 2. It doesn't really matter. But now let's take the bottom of the position that we just learned. So remember, we want 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 7, 4, 7, 5, 8, 5, 7. So if we just take the bottom, we end up with 7, 7, 7, 7, 8, 7. Now specifically, those highest 3 strings, if we play those together, we get a D major shaped chord, right? So D major looks like this. A lot of people will learn that chord right off the bat. Now, we can see this chord hidden inside of this pentatonic shape. So that's a cool way to kind of remember it. It's a really easy shape because we have 2 different trains of thought going at the same time. We have this kind of scale symmetry looking shape where it's just 2 frets apart on each of the strings. can really drill and get really fast at those with hammer-ons and pull-ons. And then we can actually just jump into the bottom of that chord. Again, this is just a major shaped chord. Wherever your ring finger is, that's going to be the root note. Like on the B string, it goes B, C, C sharp, D. That's why this is a D major chord. So if you take your ring finger to where that G is, which just happens to be right here, the 8th fret of the B string is a G note, that shape is going to give you a G major chord. So if you listen, G major, same chord, just in a different part of the neck. So it's a cool thing to maybe finish. And you can do this with any of these shapes. I just think this is the best example of it because it's the chord that a lot of people know anyway. If we took the top of this shape, we'd end up with, from the bottom lower, 5E, 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 5B, 4G. So that could be like a chord that we're looking at to kind of complete that shape. All right, so now instead of just having single notes that I can run that always sound like a scale when I just go back and forth through them, I can actually think of a more musical way to take this one position, this one shape, and turn them into chords, okay? Which I think is going to be a more practical application in your musical guitar journey, right? So we can actually start running through these other shapes. And always jumping back to this chord, which we really just gathered from this shape, all right? All of these pentatonic positions have shapes and chords that are going to sound good together. Like remember in the first one with this E minor run, position 1, we kind of played that over an E minor chord, right? So any of these things we can combine with the E minor chord. So maybe I'll start by playing the E minor chord. And then I'm going to jump into that position, which is really super easy. You can make an infinite amount of riffs just from these 6 different notes right here. 5 notes, but 6 different locations, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. E minor. I'm hammering on from 5 to 7, 5D, back to 7A. E minor, position 3 riff. E minor, position 2 riff, okay? I think that's a really cool way to kind of practice these is to start juxtaposing a chord with maybe like a riff from one of the shapes. It's a really good way to kind of solidify the scale with the musical chords that are going on and kind of starting to add like a melody to some of your playing. So chord, position 3 riff, chord, position 2, chord, position 1. Okay, so I just made a kind of a generic-ish riff from each one of these scales, positions, same scale, just different positions, okay? Now, anytime I want to change the chord, I can maybe go to, I can kind of hammer home that other shape that we just did here. That was just kind of jumping from this chord into position 1. However you want to do it. It's just kind of jumping around and seeing how these shapes are hidden within them. Same thing with like in lesson 2 of 6 of the Pentatonic series. We've got those double stops that we used. This is a great example of where you can use double stops too, because you don't even have to think about it. You can just kind of start combining these as different notes at the same time, okay? So I'm just taking the 5th fret of the A string and the D string. However I want to play them, I can play with one finger, any finger, doesn't matter. I can group them together, especially if I'm going from like an E minor. I already have these 2 fingers grouped together. And it has a kind of a cool sound when you start double stopping through it. So again, the whole point of this is to see the pentatonic scale as more than just kind of things you can riff up and down mindlessly in a way that doesn't really sound that musical, sounds like a scale, to make it more musical. And I think the way to do that, especially if you're kind of playing like a solo guitar type thing, is to start taking pieces of these, seeing the hidden shapes within the positions, and then just start rocking them all out together. So we've still got 2 more positions to go. And if you guys have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comment section, Instagram, Twitter, or the website. And I'll be back to talk to you all very soon. Thanks a lot.